Hi, this is Patricia Baker, and we're going to talk about graphical user interfaces, also called GUIs, in Java today. In this introduction, we're going to look at various components, frames, panels, labels, text fields, buttons. We'll talk about events, and we'll talk about listeners. The code we've written so far in class has been known as CommandLine applications because they interact with the user with our simple prompts, and they're kind of lacking in user experience. But with GUIs, the interfaces you're going to find more intuitive, and it's not really limited to responding in a given order. So in this slide, we've got two different examples. Our CommandLine example, which is our Cinema Price homework assignment that we worked on. And you can see the simple prompts, prompting the user for data, and then displaying some output. And then to continue on with that, you had the user add another age inside a loop, and so on and so forth. But this is our GUI example we're going to code up, and you can see that it's made there isn't this command line scenario here. Instead, you've got different fields that the user interacts with, a text field and then a button. So when we're coding up programs that are GUIs, we are going to be looking at three different kinds of Java objects, and they're in three different categories: components, events, and listeners. And the first one we're going to talk about are components, and they're the objects that we're going to put on our screen to display information or to let our user interact with the program. And a special kind of component that we're going to look at, such as a frame and a panel, are those kind of components that we use to hold together other components or organize other components. So I'm going to use our example that we're going to code up in our first activity. And this is an example. Maybe you want to use this for counting how many cars are going into a small parking garage, so you know when your parking garage is full. Every time a car goes through, you're going to press the button, and then this gets incremented by 1. But what's interesting about this, and what we want to think about, is the components that we're going to use to create this GUI are created from the following classes that I have listed here. So for each of these components, you're going to declare the object. There's the class name, which is JFrame, and here's the object name. And then in another statement, you're going to go ahead and instantiate that object by calling its constructor. So in this case, we created the frame, which is essentially this blue container. The yellow is another container called a panel, and this set of letters here, number of cars, is what is called a J label, and that's another example that I have here of declaring the object, and we're calling it car label, and then in another statement actually instantiating or creating it by calling the constructor. So we would do that for the button component also, and we do it for, this is a text field component right here, and we would do the same 2 steps for that also. So the other element we want to think about, or the other objects that are key in GUI programs, are what are called events. And events are really actions that your code or you may be interested in, such as using your mouse to click on a given area of your GUI, or entering data with a keyboard. Any of those would be events. And your program, you're going to write it to respond to those events. And when a program has that capability of responding to user events, it's called event-driven. So the last element that we're going to take a look at are what are called listeners, and it's another object. and it's an object that waits or listens for the event such as a mouse click or a keyboard press to occur, and it responds accordingly, whatever response you want to have happen when that event occurs. In our example, when the user presses on the button, we want to increment how many cars have been coming. We're counting how many cars come into, let's say, our parking lot. What's key here is this statement here. It's kind of why I have it separated out. You've got to establish, before you can really use listeners, you have to establish the relationship between the listener, the event it's listening for. So if we're listening for a mouse click on a button, we want to make sure that we have that relationship set up, and the relationship set up between the component that generates the event. So we're not having to write all this code ourselves. We're going to be using existing components and events from the Java class library, and then we'll write a customized listener class to do what we need to have happen when a given event occurs. So in summary, when you're creating a Java program that uses a GUI, you're first going to want to have your layout. What do you want your GUI to look like? And then once you have that, then this is the Java part. You're going to go ahead and instantiate and set up your components. That would be like your buttons, your text fields, your labels. You're going to implement your listener classes so that you're set up to listen for events when they occur. And then this is key, and students forget this initially, you need to establish the relationship between the listener that has the action you want to have perform when the event occurs and the actual component that it's tied to. So in our case, it's going to be a button. And we're going to use two Java GUI-related classes, the AWT and the swing class. So the Abstract Window Toolkit, also called the AWT, is the older or original Java GUI package. And you'll see that we're going to, in our first activities, use the swing package, which is a newer package, and it provides more versatility than those in the AWT. So you're ready to code up a simple example that contains the basic GUI components or elements we talked about. And in this example, when the user presses a single button, the counter is updated and displayed. So that'll be the first thing you're going to do. That's your first activity. And a little hint when you're working with GUIs is to be pretty methodical when you're setting them up, and that way you won't forget any of the steps that you need to do to set up a working GUI. All right, we'll see you in class.